There's a lot of consumer interest to buy garments that are made with the different fibers, like hemp, coconut, pineapple. And the magic thing about these value chains is that they are very linked to jobs and employment.
Hello, this is the Weekly Tradecast, a podcast brought to you by the UN Trade and Development. I'm Sarah Toms. We're exploring how major events are shaping trade and development and how that affects billions of people around the world. This week, we're looking at how we can make sustainable materials recycled from agricultural waste. For every banana or pineapple we eat, much of the plant is discarded during harvesting or processing. But this trash can be treasure. Transforming waste from bananas and pineapples into dresses and sneakers may seem far-fetched, but these eco-materials could help offset the environmental damage from fast fashion. These innovative fibres not only promise to reduce plastic and other synthetics, but they're also creating new jobs and economic opportunities. To find out more, I'm joined by Henrique Pacini, an economist specializing in trade, energy, and the environment. He's a keen recycler and photographer with an environmental focus. Well, welcome back, Henrique.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
So tell me, how much waste is there from crop production? And what do we tend to do with it now? And how could we make better use of it?
Amount of waste is enormous. Just imagine, for example, every type of crop in the world has a large part of the plant that we are not using. Of course, often we need this material to refertilize soils and keep the environment in good shape, but there is a safe amount that we could transform into other products that we don't. For example, pineapple, a plant that we work on in a project in Kenya, most of the plant is not the fruit. So most of the plant is actually a bush, like a lot of leaves, which really litter the field after harvest, and that often are burned by processors and farmers because they don't have anything to do with it, or at least no value chain developed. The same with bananas. Everybody eats bananas. We love it, right? But the biggest mass of the plant is not the fruits. So there is a lot of supply of agricultural biomass that we could use to transform into fibers.
We mentioned bananas and pineapples, but what other kinds of crop waste can be used to make textiles, and how easy or difficult is the process, and also how clean or dirty?
So any plant that has a structured cellulose, a stem, a leaf, or larger a part can be transformed into some type of fiber. For example, corn. The peels of corn can be used for that. Coconut husks, especially the outer layers, can also be used and are used for fiber making. The basic process is that every agricultural residue has a cellulose, right? And cellulose is the basis for fibers. So there are basically two ways you can transform those fibers or this material into textiles. The first is a natural and mechanical processing. So, for example, we get a coconut husk and the fibers there, and we mechanically break them apart and separate them, and then make them finer and softer with a process called cotonization, and then blend this coconut fiber into some other material, for example, like cotton to make clothes, or use this fiber directly to make more technical or products such as rags and sofa, furniture coatings, and so on. So using the natural process and mechanical processing to soften those fibers is one way. But there's another way which the industry uses in very large scale as well, which is to use the cellulose present in those materials, just like they do with wood, to chemically convert it into viscose. And viscose can be transformed into new yarn and then new fabrics, just like cotton can. So that's a more chemical intensive process, very big in industry, which resembles cotton.
Some of these textiles aren't new, I know. For instance, in the Philippines, pineapples made into very silky shirts. How are these materials now moving into the mainstream, and how are they helping to create jobs?
There's a lot of consumer interest to buy garments that are made with the different fibers, like hemp, coconut, pineapple, sugarcane. Imagination is the limit, to be honest. And people are prepared to pay a premium for those products, especially in northern markets. What is the importance of that? Realizing this potential, so transforming, creating the value chains that actually remove some of those materials from waste status, having no value, into fibers that go into products that are spun into clothes, sometimes in a pure form, sometimes as a blend into other materials such as cotton. It's very important to tap on this market. And the textiles market worldwide is immense. It's almost $1 trillion a year traded in textiles. I think it's the seventh largest product traded in the world. Cotton alone is 64 billion. And the magic thing about these value chains is that they are very linked to jobs and employment all the way, from production and agricultural sites to the heavy logistics that they need to reach tail points and sales. I think most of the people involved in industries are at the end point, selling garments. So having a broader variety of garments made of more sustainable materials, it's a double win, both for income, employment, but also for the environment.
Now, what kind of innovation and expansion then do you see in the future? Is this a realistic solution to the environmental issues of fast fashion, for instance, or a way to reduce plastic?
Natural fibers produced from agricultural residues, they can displace or complement a cotton, which is already very useful. Cotton is very land intensive, uses a lot of water to produce. And they can also displace, to some extent, polyester, which is a plastic material heavily used in textiles for its durability, but it's one of the major sources of microplastics in the world. It's very important to have that door open for agricultural waste materials to be added to the global textiles value chain. There is demand for that. There is a political interest. There's social interest to have those materials entering for their sustainability perspective. But of course, they will not replace everything, or for example, polyester. They can act as an important complement, such as like biofuels act as a complement to gasoline or diesel. They can lessen the climate impact, the persistent pollution impact of textiles as they are today. So I only see advantages. And reflecting a bit back in time, the technological development of humanity has always been based on transforming something that has no value into something that has value and is traded, right? And this is one important area where we can convert materials that have very little value into materials that are creating jobs almost immediately. Why not do that? There's a lot of consumer interest in them. So making them reach consumers, it's a win-win. But of course, the issue of fast fashion needs to be taken into account, right? We overconsume perhaps textiles today. Mm-hmm. And it's important to keep that in balance. We use more often the textiles we buy, and they are made of materials that are more sustainable and have a lower impact on the environment.
That's a good point, isn't it? Because couldn't there be a danger, perhaps, that some plants become so popular for fashion that we end up with more deforestation and unsustainable production? How can we ensure that doesn't happen?
Absolutely. That was one of the premises of viscose, semi-synthetic fiber, usually made of wood, that it would help us save on agricultural land by using woody materials to make fibers. But in the end, we can threaten forests, right? Because a lot of this wood could come from forests, especially if there is no traceability and certification involved. So any new step or further step into natural fibers or other materials that we're exploring now, like pineapple or banana fibers, need to be coupled, need to go hand in hand with traceability, with certification, so that we know how those materials are being produced. We have many technical assistance projects working on alternative fibers. The program I work on is active in Kenya and in Uganda, making fibers out of pineapple and banana, respectively. And we also try to build linkages to assist those value chains to grow and upscale. For example, I was recently in Bangladesh, where industrialists, large textile makers, are trialing those products made from our projects into making garments with them and trialing them in European markets. So we're trying to help build those value chains, but we're also trying to help with the policy and governance in this sector. UNCTAD is working together with the UNEP to help understand what is important for trade of secondhand clothes, so that they are really used by people domestically in other countries in a way that the textiles have the longest possible life in their markets. So it's important that this effort to change the materials built into textiles is also coupled with efforts to make sure that textiles have a second life or a third life, be them domestically or in countries where they are sold, or at the first life, or abroad, so in trade of second-hand clothes. 80% of people in Kenya buy second-hand, and it employs over 3 million people in the country. And it has a huge social impact. We should take that into account, both to develop it in an environmentally and social way. So we are also helping the UN environment with their work on textiles, because they are producing a set of guidelines for how second-hand clothes should be classified and sorted prior to exports. And by consulting our partners in the fields in West and in East Africa and South Asia, we can get a very first-hand view of what traders need in used textiles in order to remarket them in a positive way. So this together will really extract the maximum value of this industry.
Thank you so much. That was Henrique Pacini from the UN Trade and Development. He was this week's guest. Tune into the weekly Tradecast next week and every week for more insights on the most pressing issues around the world of trade and development. And there's even more on our website, unctad.org. I'm Sarah Thomas in Geneva. Goodbye for now.